You already know what I'm about to say. You felt it. When you were 7 years old, a single summer lasted forever. June to August was an eternity. You could live 3 lifetimes between breakfast and dinner. Every day had weight. Every afternoon stretched out like it would never end. Now you blink and it's March. You blink again. Somehow it's October. You look back at the last 5 years and they feel like one long Tuesday. You're not imagining this. I need you to hear that clearly because most people treat this like some sentimental quirk. Oh, time flies when you're older. That's just how it goes. No, stop. That's not an explanation. That's a greeting card. Something is actually happening inside your skull. Something measurable, something physical, something that changes how your brain constructs the experience of duration. And it's not what you think. It's not nostalgia making childhood seem longer in hindsight. It's not that you were happier then and sadder now. It's not some poetic thing about innocence. The machinery that builds your sense of time is running differently than it did when you were a kid. Literally differently. The architecture has changed. The processing has changed. The rate at which your brain samples and encodes reality has changed. And the result is exactly what you feel. The years compressing, the months blurring together, entire seasons vanishing into a haze of routine that you can barely distinguish from the season before it. Most people never question this. They just accept it. Time speeds up as you age. That's life. But see, that's like saying things fall down. Sure, things fall down, but why? Newton asked that question, and it unlocked gravity, orbital mechanics, the structure of the solar system. The right question asked seriously changes everything. So I'm going to ask the question seriously. Why does time speed up as you age? And I'm going to give you the real answer, not the comfortable one. Not the one that fits on a bumper sticker. The one that changes how you understand your own consciousness. And once you see it, I promise you, you will never experience a lazy afternoon the same way again. Now, here's where most people go wrong. Though they ask, why does time feel faster? Sounds reasonable. Sounds like the right question. It's not. That question has a hidden assumption buried inside it, and the assumption is wrong. It assumes time is flowing at some constant rate, and your experience of it is drifting away from reality, like there's real time, steady, objective, ticking away at 1 second per second. And then there's your perception of it, which is somehow getting distorted. That framing is completely backwards. You don't have access to real time. You never did. You have no internal clock ticking at a fixed rate. There's no metronome in your brain keeping objective time. What you call your experience of time is constructed, built, assembled from raw materials. And those raw materials are information. Every sight, every sound, every sensation, every thought, every micro decision your brain processes, that's what time is made of for you. Your brain takes all that data and stitches it into a sequence. This happened, then this, and the density of that sequence. How much stuff is packed into each segment? That's what determines whether a period feels long or short. When there's a lot of data, a lot of new information being encoded, the sequence is dense. It feels long, rich, full. When there's very little new data, when your brain is coasting on autopilot, recognizing patterns it's seen 1,000 times before and barely bothering to record them, the sequence is sparse. It feels short, thin, empty. So the question isn't why does time feel faster? The question is why is your brain processing less information per unit of real time than it used to? You're not experiencing time wrong. You're sampling reality at a lower rate. Think about that. Your brain is literally taking fewer snapshots of the world per second than it did when you were young. Not because it's broken, not because something went wrong, because it got good at its job. Too good. And that efficiency, that beautifully optimized neural machinery is the thing that's eating your time alive. Let me show you why this happens. You assume your brain has a clock, some internal mechanism ticking away, counting seconds, keeping track. It doesn't. Search for it. Neuroscientists have. They've looked everywhere. There is no single region, no dedicated circuit, no master timekeeper sitting in your skull measuring duration. What you have instead is a mess, a beautiful, chaotic mess of neurons firing, chemicals diffusing across synaptic gaps, electrical signals racing down axons at different speeds depending on whether they're myelinated or not. And somehow, out of all that noise, your brain constructs the experience of time passing. Not by measuring it, by building it. Here's what actually happens. Your brain processes information. It receives input from your senses, millions of signals per second, light hitting your retina, Pressure waves hitting your eardrum, molecules landing on your tongue. Each signal gets processed, compared against memory, categorized, stored, or discarded. And your sense of time, that feeling of duration, that sense that 5 minutes have passed, or 5 hours, that emerges from how much processing occurred, not from some clock counting seconds, from the volume of neural work performed. More processing, more experience time, less processing, less experience time. Now, this is not a metaphor. This is not me being poetic. This is what the experimental evidence shows. Researchers have tested this directly. Put someone in a novel environment, flood their senses with new information, and their retrospective estimate of how much time passed goes up. Put someone in a familiar, repetitive environment, minimal new information, and their estimate shrinks. Same objective duration, different amount of processing, different experience time. Your brain is not a clock. It's an information processor that generates the illusion of a clock as a side effect, and the rate of that processing, the amount of new data your brain encodes per second of real time, that changes across your lifetime dramatically. It's fastest when you're young, and it slows down steadily, measurably as you age. Not because your brain is decaying, not because your neurons are dying, for a reason that's much more interesting and much more unsettling than that. Your brain gets better. It gets faster at recognizing patterns, more efficient at categorizing input, more ruthless about ignoring what it's already seen, and that optimization, that incredible feat of neural engineering, is exactly what makes your time disappear. Think about what a child's brain is actually doing. A 2-year-old walks into a room and everything is data. The color of the wall, that's new information. Process it, store it. The texture of the carpet under their feet, new, encoded. The sound of a door closing, the way light falls through a window, the face of a person they've only seen 3 times before. All of it is novel. All of it demands processing. All of it gets written into memory as a distinct, separate record. A child's brain is running at maximum throughput. Every single sensory input is being treated as important because, and here's the key, the brain doesn't know yet what's important and what isn't. It hasn't learned to filter. It hasn't built the shortcuts, so it processes everything. And the result is that a single afternoon contains more recorded experience than an adult might accumulate in a week. That's not an exaggeration. Think about your earliest memories. A trip to the beach when you were 4. You can probably remember specific details. The feel of the sand, the sound of the waves, the color of someone's hat. That afternoon was maybe 6 hours of objective time, but your brain wrote it down in such dense granular detail that it feels like it lasted days. Now think about last Tuesday. What happened? You probably can't even tell me. Not because nothing happened, things happened. You woke up, went to work, had conversations, ate meals, came home, but your brain didn't bother recording most of it. It had seen it all before. Same commute, same office, same routines. Your neural machinery recognized the patterns instantly, categorized them as known, and barely allocated any processing resources. Why would it? From an evolutionary standpoint, efficiency is everything. Your brain isn't designed to make you feel like time is passing richly. It's designed to keep you alive using as little energy as possible. And recognizing familiar patterns without fully processing them is, well, it's spectacularly energy efficient. So your adult brain skips, it compresses, it autofills. You drive to work and arrive with almost no memory of the trip because your brain handled the entire thing on autopilot, barely encoding a thing. That's not a flaw. That's your brain being extraordinary at its job. But the cost, the hidden tax on that efficiency is time itself. Every pattern your brain learns to recognize without effort is a piece of your future that will feel like it never happened. Now, you've probably heard the standard explanation, the proportional theory. When you're 5 years old, 1 year is 20% of your entire life. That's enormous. That's a fifth of everything you've ever experienced. And when you're 50, 1 year is 2%. A tiny sliver, barely a blip. So, of course, each year feels smaller as you age. It's a shrinking fraction of a growing whole. That explanation is everywhere. It sounds clean, it sounds mathematical, it sounds right. And it's not wrong exactly. The math checks out. Each year really is a smaller proportion of your total experience. But here's the problem. That explanation describes the pattern without explaining the mechanism. It tells you that time feels faster. It gives you a tidy formula for how much faster. But it doesn't tell you why. Why does your brain care about proportions? What is actually happening inside your neurons that makes a year at 50 feel like a month at 5? The proportional theory treats your brain like a calculator dividing current duration by total duration and spitting out a feeling. But your brain doesn't do arithmetic on its own lifespan. It doesn't know how old you are in any meaningful computational sense. A 5-year-old doesn't experience summer as long because she's internally calculating that 3 months is 5% of her existence. She experiences it as long because her brain is drowning in new data. The proportion is a correlation, not a cause. It tracks the phenomenon, but it doesn't produce it. The real cause is underneath, and it's physical. It's about neural processing rates, information density, and the thermodynamics of how your brain allocates energy to encoding new experience versus running on cached predictions. See, the proportional theory is the kind of answer that makes you nod and stop asking questions. And that's exactly why it's dangerous. It gives you the illusion of understanding while hiding the actual mechanism, the comfortable explanation, the one that fits in a tweet. But the universe doesn't run on comfortable explanations. It runs on mechanisms. And the mechanism behind time perception is far stranger than a simple ratio. It's about how your brain builds reality itself, frame by frame, and what happens when the frames start dropping out. Here's how to think about it. Your brain is a camera, not a perfect metaphor, but close enough to be useful. When you're young, that camera is shooting at an absurdly high frame rate. Every fraction of a second, snap, another frame captured, another slice of reality encoded in full detail. Color, texture, sound, emotion, spatial relationships, all of it recorded at maximum resolution. And when you play back that footage, when you remember a childhood afternoon, it feels long because it is long. There are thousands of frames packed into a few hours. Dense, rich, detailed footage. Slow motion, essentially. Your brain captured so much data per unit of real time that the playback feels stretched, luxurious, endless. Now fast forward to your adult brain. Same camera, but the frame rate has dropped dramatically. Your brain has learned what matters and what doesn't. It's learned that the commute looks the same as yesterday, so why bother capturing it in detail? It's learned that this conversation follows the same pattern as 100 before it, so it grabs the gist and discards the rest. It's learned that the texture of your desk, the hum of the air conditioning, the face of your coworker haven't changed, so it stops recording them entirely. The camera is still running, but instead of shooting 60 frames per second, it's shooting 5, maybe 2. And when you play back that footage, when you try to remember last month, there's almost nothing there. Not because nothing happened, because your brain didn't bother filming it. The movie of your life is the same length in real time. The same number of objective seconds tick by whether you're 7 or 70. But the number of frames your brain captures inside those seconds drops every single year. And fewer frames means less experience time. The movie plays faster because there's less movie. Same runtime, fewer frames, the gaps between the frames. That's where your time goes. That's the missing years. That's why you look up and it's suddenly December and you swear it was just April. Your brain was running on low frame rate the entire time. Barely recording, barely encoding, coasting on predictions and patterns and cached routines, and you never noticed the frames dropping out because you weren't there for them. You can't miss what was never captured. The frames that didn't get recorded don't show up as blank spots in your memory. They just don't exist. The time vanishes cleanly, silently, without leaving a trace. Now here's where most people stop. They treat this as psychology. Interesting quirk of perception, fun dinner party fact. But it's not just psychology. There's a physics argument underneath this, and it's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. Your brain is a physical system. It runs on energy, glucose, oxygen, electrochemical gradients across neural membranes. Every thought you have, every perception you process, every memory you encode requires energy. And any system that uses energy to process information generates entropy. That's not optional. That's the second law of thermodynamics. It's as fundamental as it gets. Now here's the key. When your brain encounters something novel, something it hasn't seen before, it has to work hard. It has to build new neural connections, forge new pathways, allocate significant metabolic resources to processing and encoding that unfamiliar input. That work generates entropy, a lot of it. The thermodynamic cost of learning, of genuine information processing, is high. But when your brain encounters something familiar, something it's processed 1,000 times before, the established pathways handle it almost for free. The signal flows down pre-built channels with minimal resistance. The energy expenditure drops. The entropy generated per unit of real time plummets. And here's where it connects. If your subjective experience of time is proportional to how much information your brain processes, and if the amount of information your brain processes is reflected in the entropy it generates, then your experience time is linked to thermodynamic output. When you're young and everything is novel, your brain is a furnace. High energy expenditure, high entropy production, high information processing, dense subjective time. When you're older and almost everything is familiar, your brain is idling. Low energy expenditure, low entropy production, low information processing, sparse subjective time. Your internal clock isn't ticking at a constant rate. It's ticking proportionally to how hard your brain is working to process new information. And that rate drops every single year as your neural pathways become more established, more efficient, more optimized. Now, I want to be clear about something. This isn't a metaphor about feeling like time moves faster. This is a physical system processing less information per unit of real time and therefore generating fewer subjective moments per unit of real time. Your time is not speeding up. There's less of it. Each year that passes, your brain produces fewer ticks of experienced time per objective second. Not because you're dying, not because something is malfunctioning, because your brain has become so extraordinarily good at pattern recognition that it barely needs to process anything anymore. The efficiency that makes you smart, that makes you competent, that lets you navigate the world without conscious effort. That same efficiency is compressing your remaining years into thinner and thinner slices of experience time. The better your brain gets at its job, the less life you actually experience inside the years you have left. But here's the thing nobody tells you after delivering that disturbing news. You can fight it not with drugs, not with meditation apps, not with some mystical practice, with physics. The same mechanism that explains why time compresses tells you exactly how to decompress it. If the problem is that your brain has stopped processing new information, then the solution is brutally obvious. Give it new information. Force it to work. Shove your brain out of its optimized, energy-efficient, pattern-recognizing comfort zone and make it process something it has never seen before. Travel somewhere you've never been. Not a resort, not a package tour, where everything is arranged to feel comfortable and familiar. Go somewhere that confuses you, where you can't read the signs, where the food is strange and the streets don't make sense and your brain has to work just to figure out which direction to walk. Watch what happens to time. A single week in an unfamiliar country feels longer than a month at home. Not because you're happier, not because vacation is relaxing, because your brain switched back to high frame rate. Every street corner is new data. Every conversation is an encoding challenge. Every meal is a novel sensory input that demands full processing. Your brain lights up like a child's brain. It starts capturing frames again, dense, rich, detailed frames, and suddenly time stretches. Learn something difficult, a new language, a musical instrument, a skill that makes you feel stupid and clumsy and lost. That feeling, that frustration of not knowing what you're doing, that's your brain working at full capacity. That's maximum information processing. That's entropy production spiking back up. And the time you spend struggling with something new will feel longer, will feel more real, will occupy more space in your memory than twice as many hours spent on autopilot doing things you already know how to do. Break your routines. Take a different route to work. Eat something you've never tried. Have a conversation with someone who thinks completely differently from you. Every deviation from the expected pattern forces your brain to pay attention to actually process instead of predict. And every moment of genuine processing is a moment that gets recorded, a frame that gets captured, a tick of your internal clock that actually registers. Now look, you cannot stop aging. The objective seconds will keep passing at the same rate no matter what you do. But the number of subjective moments you experience inside those seconds, that's not fixed. That's variable. That's under your control. The people who feel like life is slipping away are the people whose brains have nothing left to process. The people who feel like life is rich and long and full are the people who keep forcing their brains to encounter the unfamiliar. Same number of years, radically different amount of experience time. So here's what I need you to understand. Everything you thought you knew about time is wrong. You were taught that time is a river, steady, constant, flowing at the same rate for everyone, carrying you forward whether you like it or not. 1 second per second, 1 minute per minute, 60 years, 70 years, 80 if you're lucky, and each year is the same size as the last. That's the model you've been operating with your entire life. And it's completely, fundamentally incorrect. Time is not a river. Time is a construction. Your brain builds it moment by moment from raw information. And the amount of raw information your brain processes is not constant. It changes. It changes across a single day. It changes across a single year. And it changes dramatically across a lifetime. The objective seconds are fixed. Physics gives you that. The universe ticks away at its constant rate regardless of what you do or how you feel. But the subjective experience you build inside those seconds, the actual felt duration of being alive, that is not fixed, that is variable. That depends entirely on what your brain is doing with the data it receives. A year spent on autopilot, same routine, same faces, same commute, same conversations. Your brain barely processes any of it. That year gets compressed into a thin, almost empty ribbon of experience. You'll look back on it and feel almost nothing. Not because it was a bad year, because it was an unrecorded year. The frames weren't captured, the data wasn't encoded, the entropy wasn't generated. For your subjective experience, that year barely existed. A year spent in the unfamiliar, learning, struggling, exploring, failing at new things, forcing your brain to actually work. That year gets written in dense, high-resolution detail. Every week feels substantial. Every month has weight. You look back on it and it feels like it lasted 3 years because your brain was running at high frame rate the entire time, capturing everything, encoding everything, producing thick, rich, layered experience out of every single day. The universe gives you a fixed number of years. That's the deal. You don't get to negotiate. But how much time you actually live inside those years, how much experience duration you extract from each revolution around the sun, that's entirely up to you. And this is what people get catastrophically wrong. They try to extend the years. They optimize for longevity. They count birthdays. But the people who live the longest lives in terms of actual experience time are not the ones who accumulate the most birthdays. They're the ones who never let their brains go idle. They're the ones who keep seeking novelty, keep learning, keep putting themselves in situations where they don't know what's going to happen next. They're the ones who understood, maybe without ever articulating it, that a life on autopilot isn't a long life, it's a fast one. So the next time you feel a month slip by and you can't account for where it went, don't blame time. Time didn't speed up. Your brain stopped paying attention. And the only person who can fix that is you. If you want to learn more, subscribe to Feynman Physics. See you on the next video.